everyone, and thank you for joining. My name is Tracy Cook. I'm the Online Media Manager for ModernAnalyst.com, the premier community for business analysts. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar entitled Augmenting BPMN with DMN, Documenting Process Decision Logic. Today's featured speaker is Mark Montaleone from Montaleone Consulting. Today's webinar will last approximately 60 minutes, including the question and answer session at the end. Please be sure to submit your questions in advance using the questions feature of the GoToWebinar software. And now I'd like to say thank you to Montaleone Consulting for sponsoring today's event. And now it is my pleasure to welcome Mark. Mark, please take it away.
Okay, thank you. And good afternoon from Houston, Texas, folks. It's my pleasure to do this particular webinar for you today. And you can see the title it's talking about two different types of modeling. BPMN, which stands for Business Process Modeling and Notation, and a new one that just came out this past year, which is Decision Modeling and Notation. Okay, we're going to discuss these two, and it's really very appropriate in terms of today's environment of being fairly good at these two different kinds of models. Okay, there's an abstract here. Okay, let me just briefly say that we're going to go through a couple of examples using BPMN, and the second example will also include DMN. We're going to have a very short tutorial on the two models after I show you an example, but it should not be substituted for, let's say, formal training on these two models. I want to make sure that that was clear. The other thing is that there is a lot of information in this particular deck. I would highly recommend to you to certainly get a copy of the deck either from Modern Analyst or you could go to my website, and I'll show you that at the end of the webinar, and take a look at the various slides and peruse them, all right, because you may have further questions, and it might even, how you say, encourage you to take some formal education in these two models. Okay, with that, let me just say a little bit about myself here. Again, my name is Mark, and that's what I look like. Oh gosh, my bobblehead that my wife was nice enough to buy to give me as a Christmas present about a year ago. I have about 40 years in the business, being a business analyst and a project manager, and that's what happens to you. You lose all your hair after you have so many years in the business. Also from making a lot of mistakes and, of course, learning, okay, learning from your mistakes. I have oh gosh, several certifications from the IIBA and also PMI, also from the Scrum Alliance. Okay, enough about myself. Let's get on with the subject. This picture here, right, what is displayed on your screen is a business interaction model, and it depicts many of our businesses today. They are literally virtual businesses composed of many different companies, and they're all business partners and perhaps with more than one firm. And if you think about it, with our environment, we need some type of process model that reflects how our businesses are today. And you'll notice that there's, gosh, there's lots of service providers, there are customers, there are governments involved, and let me go back, okay. We look at all these various different components. Well, this is unlike, say, doing flow charting in the past, or perhaps even what we call activity models with swim lanes. What we need, okay, what we need to reflect today's business is a modeling tool that can represent multiple business partners. In addition to that, we need a modeling tool that can show messages of collaboration, all right, between business partners. So multiple pools in a sense, and of course multiple flows between various different components. Now, I put up this slide here, and it's all about retirement. We have a number of our friends that we have worked with for a long, long time, and they are now approaching retirement, and we're waving goodbye to them as they go out the door. But at the same time, we're waving goodbye to a lot of business know-how. These individuals know about business rules of how our process decisions are made. And unfortunately for us who are remaining behind, many of these process decisions are not documented. So we have some nice flow charts perhaps, we may have activity models with swim lanes, maybe you are using business process modeling and notation, but we haven't gone as far as to, how you say, document all the process rules. In other words, when we make a decision, how do we do it? What are the rules that we use? Okay, with that, let's take a look at our agenda. I've described somewhat what our business model looks like today, and we want to have a couple of examples. I believe that people learn by example, and the first one is going to be an application. Actually, it's a medical application called peritoneal dialysis. So let's get into what this looks like. You see a picture, okay, in front of you, and there's a person that looks like they're sleeping in bed, very soundly, hopefully. And there is this machine right next to it, and that machine is called a cycler. And it's most important that this cycler helps the patient actually change the liquids inside the patient, and essentially this is what you call peritoneal dialysis, and it's for kidney disease. Okay, so keep that picture in mind, and there's also going to be some major actors involved here. We're going to see something called, well, our patient, all right, that's one actor. Another actor called the cycler machine. And these two individuals, these two entities, these actors are going to engage in a conversation that will allow for this dialysis to happen. Not only that, but to happen while the person's asleep, which means it has less of a quality impact on the person's life. In other words, during daylight hours, they can do whatever they like. Okay, so let's take a look at the first example in BPMN on peritoneal dialysis. This is a bird's eye view. It's pretty small, the print here, but we're going to zoom in on these various different tasks so we can talk about them. But I wanted to at least show you overall what the entire particular picture looks like. There is this box in the blue or teal color. That's a pool. And you see there are many other smaller pools underneath. Now, the first pool that we have on the top, that's called the operational processes that we have for peritoneal. All the other ones are supportive. And what I want to do is to at least frame the first one, and then we want to blow that up, and we'll continue to, how you say, zoom in on various different ones that I want to highlight to you. But overall, this is what BPMN looks like. Okay, so let's take a look at this. This particular box, okay, this is a pool, and it's called Conduct Automatic Peritoneal Dialysis. And it has two, you'll notice, two different swim lanes. The one on the top, and they're horizontal, is called a patient, and the one on the bottom is called a cycler. Those are the two that we saw there, person laying in bed and the machine right next to it. And then these processes that are within this pool are called orchestrations. That's the term that's used in BPMN. And you'll see that it starts, okay, with a symbol, this particular symbol here, okay, that says every night. And then there's a sequence of tasks that the patient does. And they're all connected through these solid lines and these arrows, okay, to form a process. That's an orchestration. But in addition to that, you'll notice here at the end of this orchestration, right, it has another round circle, what looks like a little envelope inside it, and it goes to another process, but that's actually the flow of it looks like a dotted line, and that's because it's a message. So orchestrations are inside these pools, but if we want to send a message, okay, if we want to send a message over to an outside process, that's called a collaboration. And those are very necessary things to have if we want to model a process, and particularly in today's world. Let me make it just a little bit bigger here, okay? We could take a look at some various events and tasks. We'll frame this one here. This is a particular task that's done by the patient. And you'll notice it says it's called take vital signs. Okay, they usually start with verb nouns. And this is what it looks like. We'll zoom in on that. This is called a sub-process within BPMN. And it's collapsed in that it's only one particular box that we see here. It's take vital signs. This is called a task. You might call it a step. Some maybe call it, say, an activity. But it's special because it has this little plus sign underneath it. That little plus sign makes it a sub-process in that it is collapsed there, but it can be expanded. It can be expanded into these various different children tasks. What's nice about it is that you could then show your model in various different stages, in a collapsed stage and an expanded stage, depending on your audience. Okay, so if we just go back a slide, you'll see that that has a little plus sign. Gee, this one here, conduct seal checklist, that's another plus sign. So you'll see different ones involved, all right, that are what we call sub-processes. So we have, yes, collapsed processes. We could have expanded processes. But there's also something else, and this has to do with the choreography of having a patient having a conversation, let's say with the cycler machine. So let's take a look to see what this is, and I'll blow this up. Okay, we'll zoom in on it. Again, this particular box represents a sub-process. It can be expanded, but you'll notice that these tasks look a little bit different than what we've had, let's say, in the past. This format here shows two different actors involved. They're having a conversation. They're having some dialogue. And if we think about it, if you have used, let's say, use case, which is another modeling technique for collecting or eliciting requirements, particularly functional requirements, it engages in a conversation just as if you were looking at a machine and conversing with it. Now remember, we said that one of the actors was a cycler machine, and the patient literally has a conversation with it as it sets up the process to do dialysis. So we have a start. Notice it has a start. We have a cycler that makes a request to load some equipment, connections to the cycler machine, to the patient, and you'll know there's something here connected to it. It has a dotted line. That's called an association. And then it has some details here which are annotations of what the patient does. And you'll notice that The patient fulfills that. Then the next step, the patient then makes a request. Press, say, a go button on the cycler machine. And then the cycler then responds back. And then the patient responds back again. So we have this back and forth conversation, like a graphic use case in a sense, okay, that describes the peritoneal process. Okay, so we've talked a bit about, let's go back just for a minute. We've talked about orchestrations. We've talked about collaborations that are connected through these dotted lines. And in addition to that, we've also talked about subprocesses, events, tasks, things that can be collapsed, things that can be expanded, and we also included something called choreography that can be a conversation through, let's say, a couple of actors. Okay, I'm going to continue on here and now draw attention, I'll draw a frame around it, to the supportive processes. We've talked about the operational ones, but now we have these supportive processes, and you can see there are several of them. Each of these various ones have their own, and I'm going to highlight, zoom in on these last three. And let me blow those up so that we can have a better look at them. Okay, these are three supportive processes, and you'll notice this one here is called order dialysis supplies. Patient does this. This one in the middle here, this one's called ship dialysis equipment, okay, and this is a dialysis equipment supplier. And then the third one here is the patient again that's actually replenishing, okay, various different equipment that is provided by the supplier. There are some interesting events here. And I'm going to just highlight those so that we can pay attention to them. The first one is a time event. You'll notice that it's a small clock, and it says that there is a period of time when this is done. Okay, so let's say once a month, and then we have an orchestration that goes into the patient inventorying, okay, the dialysis supply that they have. Okay, and this typically is what they call the liquids that are processed through this cycle machine that goes to the patient. And you order, right? The patient orders a dialysis supply, and you'll notice this goes to in a message event, and it's got a dark envelope that says it's actually throwing a message. Okay, this is a message flow. This is a collaboration. To this black box pool of the supplier. Now, one of the reasons why I call this a black box pool is because I, as the modeler, did not describe any orchestration here of what they go through in order to send supplies to the patient. It was not my interest. My interest was more on the actual dialysis process, the operational process. However, I did put this in, and you as a modeler should do that because at some point in time, let's just say that the supplier, falls down on the job. Let's just say that they did not deliver the supplies. No supplies, no dialysis. So you might want to expand that box with its orchestration to analyze to see why the supplies were not coming forth. You'll notice that from this black box, right, we have another collaboration, right, where it goes here to another message event which catches, and it represents again once a month where the supplies are provided to the patient, and then their inventory or the inventory of the patient is then of course replenished. Okay, so I wanted to give you at least an example of how some of these boxes are used, or these pools, okay, with orchestrations, with collaborations, and as I mentioned to you before, we also showed you one with something called choreography. Let's talk a little bit about BPMN. At least I've shown you some kind of an example, and a medical one at that. BPMN, well, it's version 2. It was issued back in 2011, and it's quite a tome, 450 pages. Oof, lots of things to read, okay? Of course, fortunately for us, there are a lot of good books out on the market, okay, that we can learn it. But you'll notice if you read, okay, the specification, there's over 150 elements. My, 150. Now, just to give you an idea of this, if you've done flowcharting has 30 elements. Ooh, 30 versus 150. I like the 30 number. And in addition to that, the decisions here that we make in various processes are not handled using BPMN. It's great for using various different components and doing collaborations and even choreography, but not so much in decisions. And that's why we want to talk also about something called DMN. This came out just this last year, all right, and it's called the Decision Model and Notation. We'll talk more about that a little bit later when we look at another example. You'll see that BPMN is, yes, a graphics language. It was developed by the Business Process Management Initiative, and it was adopted by our good friends over at OMG, the Object Management Group, and that happened around 2005. OMG, of course, maintains other models, okay, such as, of course, all the ones connected with UML, okay, the Unified Modeling Language, and that's use case, which we mentioned was very similar to the choreography, okay, that I showed you. Class diagrams, okay, that are dealing with data and its operations, and state diagrams, and other models also. Okay, so that's a little bit of history of BPMN, and let me just say, because of the elements, there's a lot of challenges with that. And so let's take a look at these challenges. The first thing you need to remember of these challenges, and I think I just, yeah, there we are, right slide here. BPMN is like a language. And like any language, if you've taken, say, some sort of foreign language to it, whether it be, Spanish or German or Arabic or some other language, it can be, at first, a bit overwhelming. In fact, there was a study, gosh, this happened in 2008, and I have it in the references here at the end of the deck, where it acts very similar to any sort of language BPMN does. That is, you only really need maybe 10% to get along. In other words, conversational BPMN, right? So the key here is to develop your own working set, okay? And lots of people have discovered, if you talk to some practitioners, they use maybe 10% of the elements, and that's about 15 elements, not the 150, okay, that are actually described within the specification. The other thing, a couple of more things to remember here, things that I certainly have discovered, it's easy to forget things. There are so many complexities, and adding certain, let's say, symbols or icons to some of these elements that you forget exactly how properly to use them. So we have to be careful. And I think in addition to that, if you're technically inclined like I am, you can become somewhat, how you say, enamored with some of the complexity of some of these elements and forget that our whole purpose here of using the modeling is to talk about the business, not about the technique. And I have talked to some people that have told me, gee, they had to actually remove some of the things that they put into it, although they thought it was a, I'll quote, neat thing to do. But we started talking about BPMN, the technique, rather than the business, and that's really not what our purpose is. So we have to keep these in mind. So we need really to effectively use BPMN and certainly DMN later on decisions. We need to come up with our own working set. And I would recommend to you, certainly you're going to need orchestrations because that's a sequence flow of various tasks for your actors that are in pools and swim lanes. In addition to that, you're probably going to need collaboration, because one of the reasons we use BPMN is that we can have multiple pools showing multiple business partners and then have flows between them to show how the business runs. But you may want to also use, possibly, choreography. You may have an instance where, like in the peritoneal dialysis example, that you essentially have a choreography where we have an interaction flow, okay, between, let's say, actors. And as a result, you would use something called a participant 1 and a participant 2, as I showed you in the example where there was a conversation between a patient, okay, and let's say the cycler machine. You may have something like that. So I would hesitate to say that, gee, choreography should be in your working set, but then again, you may have an example of that. So keep it in mind, but you certainly are going to want to use orchestrations and certainly collaborations. Okay, if we look at working elements, remember we said there were about 150 of them, and typically if it acts like a language, right, you're going to need about 15. So let's just take a look at some of these. The first set here, okay, this first grouping, you have various symbols, okay, there's circles, and you might use various different colors, or how you say, thicker circles, to say that this is the start of a orchestration. Here's an intermediate event. A lot of these things are, say, used for states. In other words, something has changed, say, a state, or certainly a termination point, okay, for an orchestration. In addition to that, you'll have a task. This is the task that various different actors do, but not just tasks, they could be sub-processes, right? So rather than have a string of long of various different tasks, we'll create a sub-process. Let me just say that this is probably, the sub-process is probably one of the most used elements because you're going to want to have various different, how you say, levels of the process depending on your audience. Now, in addition to these, now these are very, very interesting, particularly if you have decisions. The process that I showed you before with peritoneal did not really have any decisions in it. It was pretty straightforward. We do one task and then the next task and the next task. However, okay, these diamond shapes, okay, are the gateways that show what are the various paths that we take in terms of a process based on a previous decision. You may remember that if you've done anything in, let's say, flowcharting, that these things at one time, these diamonds, were called decisions, decision diamonds. No longer. Decisions are really made in tasks, okay, such as tasks that we have, the one that we talked about before, and the gateway is really the result. That is, what path do you take? For example, the very first one, this diamond, okay, with no symbol inside, all right, this is called a gateway, and it's called an exclusive OR gateway, where you take one path or two paths or three paths. You take one path, one of whatever number are available to you. So you might have two paths, maybe it's yes or no, or maybe it's A, B, or C, but you take one. But you may have a decision that says you could take multiple paths, that is parallel paths, and that's what the plus sign here is. One, of course, the one we talked about before was exclusive OR. This now is what we call an AND. So we do this and this. Okay, so we could have various different parallel processes, but in addition to that, we have another diamond, and that one has that circle inside it. And certainly this particular diamond is called an inclusive decision, where you may want to do path A, or path B, or A and B. So in other words, we could use a number of things. We could have a combination of different paths, or we could just take one particular path. So there's lots of different combinations, all based on a decision that was made prior to that particular gateway. Now, in addition to these, we have, of course, data objects that may be inside our orchestrations. We may have annotations. So you remember we had these annotations on some of the various different tasks for peritoneal dialysis. And these were some detailed tasks that, let's say, a particular actor was going to actually commit to. Now, I want you to remember this business with annotations, and in particular, if we go down here to the last grouping, associations. If we look at the association line, that dotted line, this is going to be used when we start looking at peritoneal. Okay, excuse me, when we start looking at DMN, the decision, model, and notation technique. So associations and annotations will be used for that. In addition to our working flow, right, we'll have the sequence flow for our orchestrations, the message flows for our collaborations, and of course we will have those in pools and in lanes. So let's just go back. Your working set here, not 150, maybe like 15, where we have orchestrations, collaborations. You might include choreography if you have an interaction, but certainly these particular elements. Now, are there more? Oh yes, there are plenty more. All right, but let's learn how to walk. Let's learn conversational language first, and then maybe proceed. But don't forget this. The business is to model a business so that we all understand the business and that it works per our expectations. Don't use really fancy things or symbols that, first, number one, you probably will forget on what they mean after a while because we don't use them every day. And remember that you may start getting a lot of questions about the technique when you really want to talk about the business. Okay, so keep that in mind. The second part of our agenda here is I want to go through another example, but this one now is going to be using the gateways. This is now going to involve decisions, which mean we're interested in how decisions are made, enters in the modeling of DMN. And DMN, right, we'll have a small tutorial too. Again, let me just remind you, don't see this as a substitute for formal training. Hopefully it'll encourage you to take some. All right. In our example here, this second example has to do with gateways. If you are a project manager, you know that there are certain decisions that you need to make on a project. And there are various different choices that you can make on how, let's say, development is pursued. Let's just say you're on a project, and on that project is received, let's say, from a stakeholder. Let's say it went to a business analyst, and let's say that there was a vision and scope that was done. But now we have to evaluate as to how do we approach the actual effort on the project. In other words, our software development, how do we approach that? Well, if you've done this before, you could say, well, in the past, depending on the project, depending on the requirements, we may use a waterfall approach. Okay. And that means that typically you elicit all the requirements up front and you have this signed off business requirements document. Or you may have decided, per the features of this particular software that you're looking at, that we're going to take an Agile approach, this iterative incremental approach. Or how about this, and some firms have done this in their formal methodologies already, is that we need a combination of both Waterfall and Agile, and maybe they call that hybrid or some other name that they've used for their particular business. The bottom line is here we have to make a decision. How do we make that decision? That's the important point. This is a BPMN model of, let's say, if you'll notice here in the second pool, we have, there's a stakeholder. And that stakeholder provides a message, okay, see the message flow to the business analyst, that's this particular swim lane, and we've created a vision, and then it finally goes up here to, to our project manager where there's an evaluation of a project and the team conditions. Let's dive into this. Let's zoom in on this particular event. Okay. You'll notice that we have to evaluate our project and we have to evaluate the team conditions. And through that, hopefully we're going to be able to come up with a decision of what approach to take. Now, if we look at this, here's where the decision is actually made. That's right here, right? So that's where our decision is made. But over here we have the gateway, right? And you'll notice that diamond, right? It could be an approach of Agile, could be Waterfall, or maybe some combination of the both, because this particular gateway allows us combinations. If we look at the evaluation task, right, we use a business rule type, you'll notice that, and that is a little symbol here that represents a business rule type. This is, of course, a BPMN task. You'll notice that we have an association with this dotted line, right? We have an association with that dotted line, and then there's this annotation. And this is the connection to DMN, decision, model, and notation. We're going to look at business rules that allow us to make decisions on software development approach and Agile team, okay, and customer conditions. And that's going to connect to our DMN model. Now just think about this. If we didn't have that, if we didn't have the annotation, let's say that wasn't there, and we didn't have the association, we essentially would say, yep, I have the process, but then how did we decide to go one way or the other or two different ways? That's the missing piece. So this goes into DMN now, right? And there is this diagram called the decision requirements diagram. And you'll see there are various different boxes that have certain meaning, okay, in DMN. The most important ones are these two rectangular boxes right in the center. One is called software development approach, and the other one's an Agile team customer conditions. Now, if we just look at those two, I'm going to go back a slide. Those were the two that were mentioned in here in terms of decisions for the annotation for the BPMN model. So I'm going to go back now, and you'll see that we have this decision, and you'll see that it has various arrows in different places. These arrows have certain names to them. We'll get to that in a minute. But the main thing I want you to know is that we have this Agile team decisions coming out of there. Let's say it's a yes or no decision in terms of we have the conditions to do something in Agile. But then we have this decision here that this feeds into the software development approach, and then this one is going to come up with a result called either let's do Waterfall, let's do, maybe a hybrid, or maybe we strictly do something called incremental, right, or iterative incremental, which is Agile. Now, there are other boxes in here. You'll notice this one. This is called an input data, right, where we put in the characteristics of the project. And this one here we have in here, what are the actual conditions of the team and also of our customer that does it lend itself to do something in the Agile world. There is another box here, okay, this one is called the Project Management Office, And you'll notice that the project management office could be, oh, let's say a PMO, and it provides various different, how you say, let me get back to that, let's say guidance, okay, an authority, okay, for certain decisions. Okay, so let's just backtrack. We were here at BPMN, we had this annotation. This is going to point us to a decision requirements document. And let's also look at the overall flow, because I think that's important. You'll know here, right, that by golly, we have a BPMN model. That's going to flow to our decision requirements diagram. And each of these rectangles, each of these decisions are going to be supported by a decision table. And you'll see there's two of them here for software development approach, and the one that feeds into it, the Agile team conditions, customers and conditions. Now, just to give you an idea of what these may look like, these are the tables. Now, in this particular one, the solution development approach, you'll see that the input to it, okay, which is all the various different project characteristics, such as do we have mandatory documentation? Are we going to use a vendor package? There are all these various different ones. In addition to that, there's one here with yes and no's as a result from a previous decision. That was that Agile team / customer conditions, yes or no. And then there was also maybe a project risk rating that also came from the input. All right, so just to make sure that you highlight this, I'm going to go to the other table, and this table, right, is going to have a yes or no result based on various different conditions from its input. And then based on those, that feeds into this, and then that will come up with this result, and that result will then tell you which way I go. Do I go this way, or do I go this way, or do I use a combination of the two? Okay, remember that we had the project characteristics lead into the tables, and also here the actual team and customer conditions that lead into this table. All right, so that's how that works. Remember what we said before. Before we didn't have this, right? We didn't have these annotations. All I know is that this was the process. This now gives me a lot more insight as to how decisions are made. Okay, so I'm going to go through now talking a little bit about DMN. DMN's at version 1. It just came out this past year. Okay, and you see that the specifications, about under 200 pages, so it's not as voluminous as the BPMN one is. And it's also a graphics language for specifying business decisions. And it does make, right, certainly, as we say here, it allows for a simpler representation, okay, of processes, because if we were to put all those various business rules and decisions for various different business rules, we'd have these gateways all over our BPMN model, and it would be rather confusing. It makes it simpler, okay, by doing this annotations as to what decisions are we making within a process. It's a way of defining business rule combinations via these decision boxes or tables. And we have been using, of course, decision tables for a long, long time. It's just that we have not had a formal approach of actually linking these two models together. Now, let me just say that there have been other models that have come out on decision. Certainly they're on the market, but this is the first one that has been supported by UML. I think that's what makes this of some significance. Now, the other thing you should note is that we still have this advantage, okay, and the most important about it allows changes to either business rules or processes without impacting each other. In other words, I could, let's go back just for an example, change some of these business rules, but not change the process. I could change the process, but not necessarily the business rules. They are independent. And there's an advantage certainly to that. Okay. These are some of the elements. And I've red flagged one of them because I found it was, well, how should I say this, difficult to get something verified in its use. And there's not a lot of examples that are out on the internet or, for that matter, in books. The 4 elements, let's take a couple of them first. These are the 2 main ones. Our decision with support of decision tables, input data like we had for the project, right? But we also had these. These 2 here, we've had a certainly an example of using the PMO, okay, for a knowledge source. Okay, so these again are these rectangles with these wavy bottoms, and they are used for in terms of showing an authority for business knowledge. And I did an example here as a PMO because I thought that might be something that many of us, okay, have certainly have dealt with. But this one here, this one, the business knowledge, this is, again, it's a rectangle, and you'll notice with the clipped corners. Now, I put a red flag on it because I wanted to highlight it. It's a function that encapsulates business knowledge and in the form of reusable business rules like best practices. I sort of looked at this similar to if you're used to, again, if you've done things in use case and if you have used, say, an include use case. In other words, common things that are within various different use cases can be pulled out, and it's called an include. This is similar. This is a reusable, right, a reusable business knowledge that can be used for various different applications. The only unfortunate part about it is that I came up with an example of using it, and I have included it at the end of this deck. It's about the last 9 slides, but it does not, how you say, I didn't want to show it as an example because I couldn't get it verified by a number of who I deem to be experts in this area. It seems like a lot of people still struggle with what this business knowledge is. So I will say this. I think some of the best advice I got, at least for this particular element in BPMN, excuse me, in DMN, is to use decision models instead. In other words, let's use this guy extensively rather than starting to use this one. Now, hopefully in the near future you will see a lot more examples, a lot more guidance, and we'll use those with, how you say, confidence that we are using it, the technique correctly. All right. There's also these various different arrows that are used, and lines, dotted lines, and solid lines for information requirements and for knowledge requirements, authority requirements that you've seen in the example. We can put these together in various valid combinations, and I wanted to at least give you the graphic of what they look like. You've seen this first one, right, in terms of a decision feeding another decision. There's the solid arrow. We've seen, of course, the input data, right, for, say, projects, and that goes to a decision. And then we also saw that, gee, we had a knowledge source, and that was supporting this decision. Okay, so we saw various different examples, okay, of those. And there are some other ones here particularly involved with business knowledges. And as I said, I think once we see more examples and get more confidence of how to use that particular element, we can certainly follow up with that, maybe with another webinar. Okay. So I want to wrap up again to talk about the business and what our businesses look like today, just to remind ourselves of why BPMN and DMN are good models to know and to use. So let me go to this wrap-up. Business process model and notation, BPMN, and decision model and notation are good ways to model our business environment today. We have many more of our business processes today that are global, that use various different business partners, and our value chains of our processes cross over lots of different boundaries, including company boundaries. Many of the people that we work with today, or gosh, maybe had worked with a year ago, all of those folks have retired and walked away with a lot of business know-how. And lots of our documentation doesn't show how decisions or these decision rules were used. We have nice flowcharts, maybe activity diagrams, maybe we even have something called business process modeling and notation with all the various different components. But maybe, and I think that's true for a lot of different businesses, we didn't document the actual business rules, the decisions. And now the people that we have, leaned on for so long are no longer there. So BPMN together with DMN provide us these complementary models to document not only our joint processes with various different partners, but also the business rules so that we can fully understand how the business is run. Okay, so that's what I want to emphasize, was that this is our business environment today, and what we need to do is to have these models certainly help us out. Okay, well, let me just say that for follow-on questions, you can certainly send me an email. There's my email address. Also, if you want to get a copy of this deck, and there's a couple of more things I want to mention about it, you can go either to Modern Analyst to get a copy, or certainly you can go to my particular website and get a free copy right there. Okay, hopefully we'll have some questions and some answers. Before I get to those, let me just mention that yes, here are our references. So you may want to get a copy of the deck and look at the references and learn more. Also, there's certainly formal education that's available that you can go to the web and look at all kinds of different courses that are possible for you. Also, there's some very good articles that are out on Modern Analyst. Okay, and as I want to say, there is another example. It's about 9 slides of using the business knowledge element, and that's what it looks like. And so you may want to take a look at that it's all the 9 slides. And if you got any questions on it, you can certainly email me. Okay, let's take a look to see if we have any questions. Well, let's I've sort of lost track of time. I want to make sure that I don't go over my time, or maybe I have already done that. Tracy, are you there?
Yes, Mark, you're doing great. We have about 6 minutes left.
Okay, that's good. Okay, so let me go through some questions, and then it looks like we have some questions also online here. But I want to at least answer some questions, because these were some of the questions that I received from various people when I have discussed these topics and some of the courses that I teach. I have this particular question: where can I find a list of BPMN tools? I think if you go to the references that I have as the last slide on this particular deck, you'll see a number of them. I don't endorse one versus another, but certainly there are some nice tools that are coming out, not only just for BPMN, but also using DMN. So I would rather you take a look at the references and make your own evaluation. Another question that I'm typically asked, where do I find, say, a list of, well, how about this one? When should I use BPMN? I'll tell you up front, if you have a business that interconnects various independent processes and you have this need for collaboration between businesses, BPMN is for you. I think that it has a very natural flow, okay, and I've seen this used by various different companies. In fact, there are some companies today that actually use it as their standard. I have this question before, DMN. Can DMN be used with flow charting or activity diagrams? If you can do an annotation, I think you can connect it, okay, just as I've showed you here, with BPMN. So I think the answer to you is absolutely. And I would encourage you to do that because we all need to start really documenting our business rules because we're left with the business. Okay, can BPMN be used within one company? Answer is yes. It's just like using activity models with swim lanes, no problem at all. I think you'll probably find at some point you may want to use certainly collaboration because you may have various branches located in different parts of the world. I've had this question, when should I use choreography? Again, as I've said when we talked about these, if you are having a conversation between a couple of actors, choreography is possibly a very good solution for it. You might have been using perhaps maybe use case. But here's another possibility for it. When should I use DMN? I've had that. This is when process models have many different gateways with lots of different decisions, and you're wondering about, gee, what were the business rules used for? Should I go path A or path B or path C? DMN should be something that you should pursue. Or at least maybe there's another technique besides DMN, okay, to do these decisions, okay, for you within the business. Well, it says here, says, why could I not validate the BKM example? Well, I've asked a number of experts, and well, some people said, yeah, I think it works. I think it works. I think that's valid. I think that can be verified. I'd like to have a little more experience with it before I start spreading the word as this is how you use this. And I would encourage you to take a look at it, take a look at various examples. Hopefully there'll be more on the internet. And challenge yourself, okay? I think it's something that we are really going to need. Okay, let's just see here. I think that might be, looks like some of the other comments here has to do, I guess, with the audio, okay, for this particular one, at least for this particular webinar. Well, since I only had 6 minutes to start, but at least I got through these particular questions that I've been asked a lot. Tracy, do you want to take over at this point, or are there other questions that maybe I'm missing?
Absolutely, Mark. We actually are running out of time, so thank you so much for today's presentation. As always, it was very informative. For those that have asked questions and Mark didn't get to them, he actually will be reviewing this after, and you can certainly contact him at his email address that's on the screen. I'd like to thank everyone today for attending today's Modern Analyst webinar. And I'd like to remind everyone that today's webinar, along with the slides, will be archived at the ModernAnalyst.com website in 2 business days. Thank you everyone for attending, and thank you again, Mark, for such a great event. Have a great day.
Yes, and thank you for giving me the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.